Well, Michel, it's such a pleasure to meet you here. Great that you take time. Hi.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Indeed.
you too. It's so funny actually. I had to really laugh about this that the two of us who were supposed to sit now actually vis-a-vis in a real room in
Hmm.
Hanover are meeting in the digital world now, kind of between the worlds. And I really thought it has something to it because that's exactly your topic, to move between those different worlds, between the analog
Yeah.
and the digital and the real and the virtual world. Where do you feel most at home at?
Well, I feel very much at home at the physical world, but I am very interested, as you know, in all the digital incarnations and mirrors of our world, and I think they tell us a lot about who we are and how we see ourselves, and this is a parallel universe that has always inspired me and fascinated me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you think there are actually still clear borders between those different worlds, or are we in a time where these borders somehow don't really exist anymore?
Well, I mean, of course, it's obvious that we a lot of us are living almost a second life online and have almost a second and separate personality online. And on the other hand, the Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa already wrote a lot of books many years ago about him sitting in his room and observing the world from behind his window and not really wanting to participate in the world. And in a way that hasn't changed. I think we're to a certain extent observers, and the window of Fernando Pessoa has become our computer screen, and through the screen we have this parallel world in which we somehow made an alter ego for ourselves to deal with all the stuff that's happening there.
Is that something that you actually like, that you have the chance to also create a sort of different image of yourself in the digital world? I mean, do you use this also in a playful way, like in
Well,
social
I'm
media and so on, or do you try to be very close to what you really are, how you present yourself in the outside?
I mean you know the I'm not a natural user of social media. I mean, I do it, but there are many of my colleagues, and especially younger colleagues, that are much more natural and much more dedicated to it. And for them, it's really I'm really admire the amount of work and the glimpses of their lives we see through Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And for me, I have to remind myself to do it, but for these people, it's part of their nature. They are somewhere and they immediately start filming themselves because they know they need some material for these outlets and for these sides to themselves, which is fascinating. So so to a certain extent, I am aware of it and I use it. But I'm not as natural as many of my younger colleagues.
Now we see you sitting in what I guess is your studio, right? Or where are
Hmm.
you there right now?
I'm in my studio, yeah. So there's a lot of synthesizers behind me and instruments and
Fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can take a moment to actually show us around a little bit. What is the equipment that you use when you create your ideas, your operas, especially, of course, since we are talking about Eight.
Yeah, I mean it's a combination of sitting behind the piano and working on a computer screen and sort of hearing the music in my head and writing it down on old-fashioned notepaper. So it's a really combination of these three media types that I use, and I use quite a bit of electronic sounds in my work, and these I make with the computer and with all these synthesizers behind me. I have a weak spot for old school analog modular synths. So you see all these boxes with wires. So I use them to create sounds to make almost an analog DNA, and I record it in my computer and then use it further. So it's also in Eight you hear a lot of these machines behind me. What I like about it is that I mean, I grew up with computers, so I'm quite flexible and virtuosic behind, in the digital sound creation. But I became a little bit bored about 5 years ago. That you have all the plugins, you can make all the sounds under your fingertips, under your mouse, and I really started longing to have a tactile relationship with sound again. So I bought this synthesizer module where you can patch chords in and turn knobs, the stuff that Karl-Heinz Stockhausen used many years ago. And I really, that really triggered me. I love the immediacy of it, and the fact that you turn a knob, physical knob, and something changes in the sound instead of sliding a digital, virtual slider on an instrument. And of course that grew completely out of control. So with one box, more boxes started to arrive at the house, and it became this huge thing. And now I'm actually downsized a little bit again. But
are you back to vinyl, back to tapes? I mean, since you were born in 1970, obviously you grew up with these things, right? And all this kind of CDs, compact discs, and everything came later. I mean, is it that you are going back to that too?
Maybe. I think the stuff that we listen to in our youth and in our teens are so formative. So especially this synthesizer you see here with the colored buttons. That's a Jupiter 8, and this is a very iconic synth from the 80s. And this is a sound I grew up. Kate Bush uses, and Duran Duran and all these bands that I listened to when I was a teenager. And ABBA. So having this in my studio now, it's a youth dream come true.
But I find it really highly interesting that on the one hand you move more and more towards the virtual reality, and on the other hand there is also this other part in you that sort of wants the actual, to touch things and to have the absolutely real analog version of things. Maybe we can come back to that later. Let's talk about Eight a little bit, since this is such a fascinating project that you have done, such a fascinating creation. I had the huge pleasure to experience it. I wouldn't even say walk through it or listen to it, but to experience it, since I really felt that my whole body was, and my whole self was actually part of this experience. And for those who haven't seen it in our audience, let's explain that you get a VR device, a VR glasses at the very beginning, and headphones, and you're standing in the dark corridor, and the only thing that you see is a little path on the floor in the darkness that you move forward, and you come into a corridor where you actually see an old woman who is greeting you and who leads you through the whole opera, through the whole process, singing and taking you along. And a very special experience, I have to say, was for me in the very beginning, that even my own hands were virtual. I could see my hands, but it were not mine. And I had the feeling that even before actually the opera started, it had already started, right? All this is already part of it. So how much am I, as the one who is experiencing it, actually, how much am I sort of a protagonist in Eight?
Well, I mean, so to jump back a little bit, where I wanted to do this piece about infinity, and I was sitting down with the designer Teun Mosk, and we were thinking, okay, how can we do this? Are we going to make a normal opera? Are we going to do music theater? Or suddenly we thought, okay, what if we use VR? Because it's in principle, it's an unlimited world you can create in it. And so we started researching a lot of VR, and when we did it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there wasn't a lot around, and the stuff that we saw was really quite passive. So you were sitting on a chair and you could look around a little bit, and it was still impressive often, but after a few minutes you got bored because you couldn't really enter the world. And so what we wanted to do is really make make a world that you can walk through and relate yourself to. And this is one of the main goals of this piece. Is what you say is really make the audience the protagonist in the piece, and make you a companion for this woman that takes you back through her life. And there were a lot of technical challenges to do this, because for one thing, we wanted it to do wireless, so you don't have any wires and you can walk around freely. And we wanted to give the idea that you make this enormous walk in 15 minutes, that you kind of lose how much you walked and how big the spaces that you walked in. And so we did all these tests with these patterns on the floor, and to see how can we make someone walk and turn to a corner and not being able to know where they are anymore. And the actual, to give a little bit of the secret away, the actual surface of the installation is only 7 by 7 meters, but you have the idea that you walk much further. So
absolutely, I mean, you are leading us into the space there. It's like, I mean, I think it's okay to say it, that, we are going through this corridor, but then we are coming into really open space, like in the universe. And at one moment we are in a sort of cave, and there's water and everything. And then we are in a mountain landscape, and there's a wide open with a forest, but deep down. So also you are playing a lot with height and with moving elements in the room, basically, as we can see it. But I can also imagine, I mean, for me, all this looked incredibly real, very, very kind of plastic. Do you say that in English? Plastisch. Mm-hmm. And I really thought, I mean, this is so technically so incredibly advanced. I mean, there must have been a lot of work behind this.
Yeah, we worked on it for 2 years. The actual spaces that you walk through and that you describe, so the smaller spaces and the larger spaces and the height, and we actually use this almost as a protagonist in the piece because they create a certain emotion, a certain feeling for the visitor, and to enhance the emotional state of the protagonist of the piece. So we really use this as a dramaturgical tool. So there's I mean, of course, there's a certain limitation of what you can do visually and technically, because of just the hardware limits of the computers, and so we try and push it as far as we could. But we also decided we were going to play with reality, because I think maybe unreality is more interesting than reality in this kind of works. And so when you are in the cave and there's these rocks coming towards you, when the rocks turn, you see that they're actually completely flat. So we show the backside, so we did all these things that play with your idea of where you are and how things look, and they make you question everything that you see, really. And specifically the woman, the protagonist in the piece, that was the most difficult thing for me to get done, because I want you to feel a connection to this person. And we did this super high res version of these 3 women, of the same woman in different ages, and somehow they felt, in the beginning, in our test period, they felt really unreal because of the realism, if you know what I mean. So they were these high res entities that felt very cold and distant. So we actually took a few steps back and made them much more, maybe lower res, and they have these glitches going through them, and sometimes you can even see through them, and they become black and white, and so they become more of a memory, of a video recording of who this person is, and they blend much more with the surroundings. And we did a lot of tests with the audience as well, and we found that people related to these slightly lower quality protagonists much better as to the high res ones. So even in the looks and in the design of the installation, we did a lot of research in how you relate to the surroundings, and what do we accept as reality, and how do we bend this idea of reality, really.
What I find extremely interesting also, to sort of see myself in how far can I follow this woman in her emotional state. And obviously you are playing with the scenery that you use, and bring it according to the emotion and the story, especially the storyline of this opera, which is that this woman is looking back at her life and basically also a little bit moving backwards, becoming from an old woman, a young woman, and then a child. And we are moving from this huge space into a very narrow space. And at one point we are even sitting under a table and hiding basically with her as a child. And I found it so fascinating how sort of the idea to introduce VR, virtual reality technique into this opera helped me to really get into it with my whole emotion and to connect to it. And I was wondering, there is a part of me that thinks, well, I'm so fascinated by this technical side and I could only focus on that. On the other hand, it totally throws me into the emotional state. And I wonder, what is it for you? I mean, is the technique for the sake of the technique, or what's the purpose?
Well, no, I of course, I mean, or maybe not of course, but very important to me is that you the technology is in service of the libretto and of the larger idea of the concept. Like this, it's very challenging because a lot of people haven't seen VR in their life yet, and they will walk into the space and they of course will be fascinated by what they see and the fact that they are there in this completely new world. And
it can also be a bit challenging, right? I mean,
it can be. I mean, yeah, there's
the depth, and if you have some sort of
there is a certain amount. We get daily reports, and we've done this in several countries now. We get daily reports, and there's a certain number of people that stop because they can't take it. They're too afraid, or they have fear of heights, or of confinement, or they find it just emotionally too much. So I think it triggers different things from different people. And if you my kids, for example, who are very much used to gaming, and they were not impressed by the graphics at all. They thought, well, I know this from my games, So they immediately had a head start on a slightly older audience because they understand the language and they understand the this world. So they immediately could relate themselves in this digital world, which is fascinating to me because, it's they don't have to decide anymore whether what they see, what it is, or what it is. Is it allowed in an artwork? Yes or no? They just accept it for what it is. And I think there's possibly a divide between audience that sees it for the first time and audience that is already experienced in VR or in digital art, basically.
I mean, obviously I'm talking a lot about how I experienced this here because it is a total individual experience that you have with this piece, and that's part of the idea, right? That we don't share that experience with a big group, but that we are going through this alone for 15 minutes. And I was wondering, the music that you choose, it's sort of indie pop style music. You have you took part from your new album Time Falling that you created together with Kate Miller-Heidke, the Australian singer-songwriter and opera singer also. She is also moving between worlds. And the music is it is somehow, for me it felt somehow pure and not too complex. It was sort of a clear music that was also on a very direct emotional level. And that was something where I was wondering, is in a way, was it necessary to take music like this because the visual aspect of the whole thing is so overwhelming that you think like, if you now take also music that's totally overwhelming and very high beat music, that it's simply too much to take in, or how was it for you to create that?
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. So I started with music which was much too complex, really. And we again did tests with the audience and people. I mean, there's only so much you can take in, and the downside of the more complex music was that people didn't even have time to listen because they were looking and there were too many things happening at the same time. So that's why I decided to really make it much more focused and sort of distill it to a certain to a certain essence. And yeah, I mean it's definitely more on the sort of more indie pop scope of my language, because I do slightly more complex operas as well. But in this case, I decided, okay, let's go for this angle because of what you just said, because it has to level with the visual language, and it has to be enough air and space in the music to in order to take everything in.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go through it again after I had finished it. I just thought, okay, let me do it again now to get a chance to get even more of it. And I guess that the more often you do it, you will always experience something new. This kind of way that you had to shape the music in a certain way in order to make it fit with the visual outcome. Is that a new way of thinking for you? I mean, would you usually start with the music and then add the visual side? I mean, that's maybe a little bit too simple, but do you know what I mean, probably?
No, I always do it in parallel. So when I write the music, I also work on the film script, or I work on the visual script, so that I know that they really they really interlock with each other and can extend each other. I couldn't do it by just writing one of these layers and then adding the other one later on. That wouldn't make sense. So the timing of the events in the story and the timing of the music are conceived at the same time.
Yeah. For some reason, this is a perfect installation during Corona times. Because you don't have to face all the problems that every other opera has to face right now.
Yeah.
And everybody thinking about, keeping the distance and on stage and behind stage and, in the audience and everywhere. And you simply have an installation here, which doesn't have any of these problems. Obviously, you created it long before Corona. But the idea to have a total individual experience here, instead of a shared experience with other people, that is, I think, a subject that is very interesting right now, especially because of Corona.
Yeah.
Since we haven't had shared experience for weeks and months, and if we look at America, they will still have to wait longer even. So what is your perspective on this now? I mean, not regarding Eight especially as a project, but in general, how do you feel, how important is it actually to also have shared experience? Or does it go more into this individual experience?
Well, I mean, I don't think it can ever replace the experience of being in the concert or in a theater together or in an opera house together, because that's such a wonderful ritual that we have and that we should keep, But I do think, aside of that, this is an interesting angle that artists should keep on researching, because I think a lot of the young people, they experience so much through the PlayStation store and the Steam game store, and these are their portals to moving to different worlds in a way, and I think it's important for us artists to find our way in these, to get into these places and offer works of art alongside the games, alongside these kind of things, so that we can get that audience interested in our works. And I think there are some. Sorry.
I mean, what would happen otherwise? I mean, do you think that if you wouldn't do this, if you wouldn't offer things like this, that would mean the end of what we know as opera?
No, I don't think so. I mean, of course, of all these gamers, a lot of people will evolve and and become interested in classical music and opera, etc. It's just that it's part of our DNA. It's a part of the DNA of our time, and for me, it feels very natural to add it to my composition palette the same way that the tuba was added to the orchestra. It's just another color, and it's another way of conveying the message. And And I think, you know, if Mozart would be alive, he would do exactly the same thing. I'm pretty sure he would be a gamer and you know, create with all these exciting new media. And I think, you know, having said that, the same analogy with the tuba, you have to write the good notes for the tuba, and it has to be in the ensemble. And the same way I approach technology, it should be supporting the general idea of the piece, of the concept of the piece, and not be about all these technology. It's a tool, and it should never be a subject, I think.
One could also choose a total different road, right? And say, well, in our times where we are overwhelmed so much by the digital world and totally all the time in contact with, you know, digital things and with our computers and with virtual things and so on, let's keep the music, let's keep the opera, let's keep the arts as a space where we can actually have the real thing in terms of, you know, really go into it, spend time together, having sort of in a Zen kind of idea, you know, be in the moment and things, and go back to the actual, you know, almost island of being in a quiet, yeah, in a, how can I put this, in a place which makes us be really there. Mm-hmm. Are there these two poles also for you, or is it totally clear for you that the one end is the right way?
No, like I said before, I think the ritual of a concert and the ritual of a performance, it's magical, and we should never lose that. And I really enjoy it, and I need it, and I really miss it in this, you know, in the last half year that I can't go to an opera house anymore. On the other hand, you know, there are different colors in our outputs, and I think the digital side, you know, the VR side, or the stuff we do online and we see online or on our smartphones, we have to find this is an important portal for many people in their life. They you know, they not only communicate with it, but they do their banking on it, and they do their meditation on it, and they do their yoga, and they, you know, their whole lives are this window has become a window for their lives. And I think in this window, the art should be present, and not only there, but definitely we should be there, because otherwise it's a missed opportunity. And yeah. You know, and this goes much further than creating a digital concert house, or create, you know, make stream your concerts online, because that's still passive. We need something more active, and, you know.
Yeah. And this interactive part is very strong in Eight. One has also to say that obviously Eight is a work that you did which really focuses very much on these technical aspects, but you have done a lot of other things, of course, where there is either both the real and the virtual world sort of combined, like in Blank Out, that was presented in Herrenhausen at the KunstFestSpiele 2 years ago. Is it 3 years ago, I guess, where you have both. You have a real performer there and a virtual performer, sort of digital world and real world combined. Looking at that, you actually were trained as a composer. Before that, you were a sound engineer, and then you studied composition, and then you went into filmmaking and stage production. The visual part and the musical part are sort of the two main things here, obviously together with the technical part. But talking about influences for yourself, what would be main influences for you on the musical side and on the visual side?
Oh dear. Well, I'm a real omnivore, so I listen to a lot of music and a lot of music styles, and I watch a lot of art. I mean, there are you know, like installation art of Bill Viola, or film directors like David Lynch, or Charlie Kaufman. I'm a huge fan of Charlie Kaufman. You know, Bach, Stravinsky, Ligeti, Sarajevo. You know, Aphex Twin, Radiohead,
Very
a lot
widespread.
of a lot of jazz, a lot of world music. So I really love. I mean, there's I think the genres don't really interest me that much. So I think in Spotify, a whole new generations they skip from from Beyonce to Bach and to Radiohead and to No, and there's no, they don't really realize it. And I think it's very old-fashioned to. It's only for newspapers that they still review in genres, and I think we need to get rid of that. Really, there's
Sure.
good music, there's bad music, there's good art, there's bad art. Doesn't matter which style it is in.
And I mean, of course, but maybe people think different what good music is. I mean, can you say what makes something good music for you?
Well, okay, let's talk about Bach. I think so. What I'm looking for in great art or in great music is that on one side there's the construction, there's the skeleton of the piece, there's the head basically, and on the other hand there's the human side, there's the heart, there's the poetry, and once these two are in perfect balance, that makes great art for me. And with Bach, that's a prime example of a composer that manages to do both. You can analyze his compositions. They're very often very formalistic and mathematical even, but they also touch me to a way that I can't stop crying. So especially his vocal music. So there's something more about it which transcends the ratio and the head. And I think all good art basically finds a balance between the head and the soul or the heart, and so that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm striving for, and that's why I'm trying in my work always to have a humanistic viewpoint and not a. I'm a true humanist in my operas as well, and so they're never about huge social themes or subject. It's always the perspective from one human being, and therefore also the subjects that are very universal and very that we all can relate to in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually something that you incorporate all these modern techniques and everything that is possible right now, and on the other hand, this focus that you have regarding the topics that you tackle in your works is pretty, well, one could say traditional in a sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are topics, these are existential themes that are around already forever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry?
No, I mean, yeah, that's true. But so, I mean, one of the biggest compliments I can get when someone sees my work or goes to an opera is that they don't even talk about the technology. They talk about what moved them and how they related to the protagonist on stage. I mean, that's what you want to do. In a way, I'm a storyteller. I want people to get dragged by their colors to the story and identify with the people that they see and hear, and the fact that we use 3D projections or VR, that doesn't matter. That's a tuba and the orchestra. That's only the vehicle to get the message across.
Yeah, but as I say, I mean, when I experienced Eight, that was exactly how I felt. It was that it really sort of threw me into the emotional contact with the singer and with the whole story, and basically the technical things helped me to get into that, and to connect to it really. Well, thank you so much, Michel, that you took time for this. It's just that you can't come to Hanover.
I know. I mean, but I'm every day I'm getting the report of the ushers, giving all the reactions of the audience. So I do follow it, and I'm very happy that it's there now in Germany. And in Holland we're canceling a lot of performances because of the second wave of COVID, and I'm very happy to see that in Germany you guys are doing a lot better, and things are still moving forward, which is important for the soul of the people.
Thank you so much. And it's great that we could have this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.